Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Crypto News Podcast. It's your host, Matt Zeha. We are buzzing as always, still coming in hot from arguably one of the best cities in the world, Buenos Aires. My time here is coming to an end. I absolutely love it here. And I absolutely love when I have a fellow Canadian on the pod. I was fortunate enough to meet this lad back in August at Blockchain Futurist. Shout out Tracy Laparulo for always running a great conference in Toronto, one of the biggest crypto conferences of the year. Got to meet him, interview him, and the reason why, because he is the CEO of Coinbase Canada, and they made their move. They came back to Canada, and they are moving and grooving. Lucas has always believed in Coinbase's mission, and he even opened his first Coinbase account back in 2014. Present day, he ensures Coinbase is built for Canadians with their interests in mind, working with partners, government, and regulators. He's making crypto more accessible to Canadians. Prior to Coinbase, he was the founder and CEO of Pinshape and had an exit to Formlabs and was senior director at Shopify, another incredible Canadian company, leading various operational and finance teams. One of the GOATs in the crypto space. Lucas, pumped to have you on, my friend. How you doing? How is the nation's capital treating it today?
Yeah, Matt, great to be here and thanks for having me. Yeah, the nation's capital is good. It's early December, it's getting cold, and yeah, it's good. I love this city.
It is awesome.
Yeah, had the chance to live all over the world, all over the US, and made my way back home thanks to Shopify.
I will say Ottawa, I think, is one of the more, it does get cold as hell, and we must say that for preface notes, but Ottawa in the winter is absolutely elite, like with the Rideau Canal and everything, the beaver tails everywhere. Like it's just, it is one of the best places to be, in my opinion, if you're going to spend winter in Canada. It's pretty up there.
I agree. It doesn't have any of the high highs, the mountains or the oceans, but it has a lot of great stuff. Absolutely love being here. It's a great family city.
100%. Let's jump right into it here. Coinbase, to my knowledge, was in Canada a couple of years ago. All the big institutions, the Coinbases, the Binances, all of the tier one exchanges had to go, which is classic Canada, where we love sort of wrecking the party when it's a good party. Fast forward last year, I guess this year, 2024, Coinbase comes back in. Coinbase, easily the most reputable exchange in the world, and probably has the highest brand recognition, and the company that's done the most and has hurt the least. And this is why I love Coinbase. Obviously I've had the Binance team on, I've had the other Asian exchanges on. Volume wise, they're behemoths, but they've done some maybe no bueno stuff in the past, and we'll just leave it at that. But again, Coinbase, literally the blue chip brand name of crypto. So big fans of you guys. Walk me through the move back to Canada. How did that all go down? What was it like? Any good stories? We'd love to hear everything and anything.
Yeah, for sure. So in Canada, we had actually an interesting collapse of an exchange here called Quadrica a few years ago. There's a Netflix documentary for anybody.
So interesting.
But what happened was our regulators decided to step in and work towards providing some regulatory clarity in market. It is actually a blessing in disguise for the industry here, because what ended up happening was our regulators set out something called a pre-registration undertaking agreement, which was effectively a promise from crypto exchanges to become compliant in market. And it was a way to forcing function to help crypto exchanges like Coinbase decide, do we want to invest in becoming compliant, or do you want to exit the market? And there are many exchanges that decided to leave the market. Coinbase decided to commit to Canada, commit to regulatory clarity. We built an executive team. We started pursuing our registration. And this year in April, we were registered as a restricted dealer here in Canada. And so Coinbase Canada is now the first international exchange to be registered in Canada. And we're now pursuing our CRO registration. But I'd say amongst a lot of international geos, Canada is actually quite far ahead in terms of regulatory clarity and around Canadians just getting access to digital assets. And so I'd say the scope of crypto is quite narrow in terms of the products and services that we have here, but we have a really good starting point and a good opportunity to help millions of Canadians get access to crypto. And Canada's I think it's the third most crypto-aware country of all the international geos that we operate in. And so Canadians are very crypto savvy. They understand crypto. They're fiscally responsible and educated. And so we have a strong business here. As you said, I think we're the largest exchange in Canada. We've been around here for actually a couple of years in terms of our customers, but we're really just starting to get our product built out to really provide the services that we want, which is, as a starting point, making it really easy for Canadians to move money in and out of Coinbase, and increasing the limits around the amount of fiat currency that Canadians can move in and out of Coinbase. So we have a lot of work to do, but it's been a really great start. We built, we're about 250 employees here in Canada, Coast to coast, Victoria to Newfoundland. And we're on track to build a strong business and help a lot of Canadians.
I love that. Lucas, you brought up a couple great points. I want to take just a quick break from Coinbase, and obviously it is the start of the show, but just sort of the crypto landscape and crypto in Canada. Ethereum being founded in Canada, Vitalik being from Canada, like there are so many incredible builders from Canada that literally dominate the overarching massive behemoths in the crypto space. And you also have the publicly traded companies. There's a shit ton of publicly traded companies in Canada that do direct, crypto initiatives and products and services, like your Hut 8s, like your Cypherpunk Holdings, which is now Solana Strategies. You have HODL, you have Hold, like Immutable Holdings. You have so many companies, and I think Canada was the first country to sort of allow the publicly traded crypto-based companies to move and groove as well. But I never really got that. It's like, okay, we let them buzz on the public markets, but then we have so many rules and regulations on the just sort of crypto markets. Like I never, you know what I mean? I never really understood that.
Yeah, we are actually the first to have ETFs in market as well. We are the first to have a Bitcoin ETF and ETH ETF. We have 3IQ and Purpose that are building really strong accessibility in the public markets. But you're right. I mean, a lot of Canadians, a lot of innovators in Canada have had to register outside of Canada. And that's just because in Canada, we have a very stringent regulatory regime.
Yes.
And there's pros and cons of that, obviously. The con is that it's harder to innovate here. It's harder to bring new products to market. The pro is that we have what we think of now as a very high trust environment for crypto to thrive in Canada, because we have alignment. We're working towards alignment with our government. We work very collaboratively with our regulators, both at the OSC level, the CSA, the securities dealers in Canada, as well as CIRO. And so our industry in general has built better relationships with our regulators than in most countries. And we're fortunate actually to have regulators that understand that crypto's here to stay. They understand this is an asset class that isn't going anywhere. And it's really a function of how do we do this in a safe, compliant way and keep Canadians safe and educated. And, as you know, Canada is a disclosure-based regulatory regime. So it's a principle-based regulator. And so interestingly, somebody who's never tried to influence the government before in my work, over the last 2 years, I've spent a significant amount of time learning, how does this government work? How do you change rules in Canada? How do you advance a regulatory regime in Canada? And what's been interesting to me is are the objectives of our regulators and Coinbase are perfectly aligned. When we look through what our regulators are trying to accomplish in Canada with regulating digital assets, we're very much from a principles perspective, very much aligned around keeping people informed so that they're making decisions that they understand, that we're keeping bad actors off of our platform, keeping criminals off our platform, and helping Canadians understand what digital assets are, and really making sure that they're informed and they're doing it in a safe, compliant way. And so how we get there is sort of TBD. There's lots to work out, and we're obviously in a very early stage of regulating this asset class. But I'm quite confident and optimistic in Canada. We have, a strong path forward for this asset class to mature. And the way I think about that is both the institutional side. So how do we get more institution and banks involved in crypto? And how do we get governments participating in the digital economy? I think, today is December 11th, and today in Vancouver, as an example, the mayor of Vancouver putting together a proposal to explore Bitcoin as part of their strategic strategy of preserving purchasing power in Vancouver for the city of Vancouver. And that's like a trend, obviously, that came out of the US administration in terms of governments now starting to think about crypto and Bitcoin specifically as a form of preserving wealth. And obviously in retail, we've been doing this, as you said, I've had my account for 10 years. I've been doing this for a decade, creating the Lucas Bitcoin Strategic Reserve. But now institutions are following on. They're understanding what Bitcoin is and the value that it provides and the long-term inherent nature of preserving value and the opportunity to diversify from a system that is degrading value in terms of fiat and printing money. And, in Canada, as an example, our government over the last decade has added 80% more fiat into our M2 money supply. And so when you think of getting paid in Canadian dollars, one way to think about that is our Canadian dollars, like our paychecks, are decreasing in value by about 8% a year. right? And so we get paid in this currency that is becoming less valuable in terms of our purchasing power. And a lot of people around the world, and certainly in retail, have been exploring alternative assets that we can own that we believe will increase our purchasing power. And so I always tell people, like, if you owned a Bitcoin 10 years ago, you still own one Bitcoin today, right? The Bitcoin, that hasn't changed. What changed is everything else has become less valuable. And so institutions and banks are starting to appreciate this. And part of the work that we're doing in Canada is starting to help institutions understand how to leverage the technology that Coinbase has built over the last decade, which is what we call Coinbase Prime, which is an institutional API that manages staking, custody, and exchange services for institutions like banks, pension funds, hedge funds, portfolio managers, asset managers, for them to access technology for their clients. And so we provide sort of a gateway for a lot of institutions to leverage the technology that we built to provide these types of access to the digital economy to their clients. And I expect, net zero will be I think a pretty significant shift from this retail speculation that sort of you and I have been in for the last decade to now a sort of a normal par for the course asset class that is going to be embedded into most structured products, most financial strategies, and diversified into everyday portfolios. Even like Fidelity's plain vanilla fund has a 3% allocation now. So we're just starting to see this become normalized into day-to-day lives of everybody. And I expect that in the US, post the Trump administration, assuming their mandate in the US on January 20th, we expect a lot of institutions to start participating in the digital economy, and the rest of the world will follow, including Canada.
Well said. Wow, what a riff there. Also, you have a great voice. Like you got a voice for radio. Like you got a nice, deep, like projecting, like I hear myself talk.
You get my mic.
No,
my mic up.
No, yeah, you have a classic, like, good CEO voice. I hear myself talk when I listen to the podcast. I'm like, you are such a goober. Like what the, just anyways, I gotta start smoking cigs or something, get the nice deep voice going. But anyways, back to the institutional adoption and institutional interest. This is something that maybe passion is the wrong word, but when the big dogs get in, it opens the floodgates for everyone else. We sort of already started to see it. There's rumors swirling around all over the internet, all over crypto Twitter, crypto X. That's, the corporations and countries, for that matter, have already started their Bitcoin reserve, their Bitcoin stockpile. I speak with a lot of incredible guests on the show, but not many from Canada. And I would love to know what these conversations sound like. What are their pain points? What gets them going? What maybe tickles their fancy a little? Like, tell me about the conversations you have with these banking execs, with the government, execs, just anyone in a place of authority when it comes to institutional adoption in Canada.
Yeah, like, just to maybe step back for a second. When you think of Canada, we're fairly unique in the world in how centralized our financial system is. And obviously, the crypto movement is a move away from centralization into a decentralized environment, permissionless, trustless, decentralized environment. And so when you look at Canada, one of the unique qualities of our system and our financial system is that we're one of the most highly centralized financial systems. And obviously that comes with pros and cons over the years. But in Canada, we have 5 banks that control 85% of all the domestic assets in our country.
And Lucas, I'm just going to jump in here for the listeners at home as 2 Canadians. Guys, I do not have one friend who doesn't use one of the big 5 banks. I don't know one friend's parents who doesn't use one of the big 5 banks. It is literally insane. You bank with them, you do everything with them, and you do not use any of the other, who I didn't even know they had 15%. I thought it would have been more like 1, but sorry to interrupt. Just wanted people to really hammer that point home there. The floor is yours.
Yeah, exactly. Like they've built fantastic institutions, and I've had the privilege of working for 2 of those 5 institutions, and they provided a lot of safety and security in Canada over the last few decades. They've helped manage us through a few financial crises, and they've managed risk differently because they haven't had to take on the risk that other systems like the United States, where you see, I think, over 4,500 financial banks in the United States.
Insane.
Are sort of 5-ish. But, these 5 banks have been, they have 90% of the people, 80% of the money. They manage 80% of wealth in Canada. So when you think about where's all the wealth in Canada, our 5 banks control and manage 80% of all the wealth that Canadians are saving long term. And so it's really important that these financial institutions start participating in the digital economy, because obviously that's the trend of where people are diversifying their assets. And so I expect that next year financial institutions will come online and start introducing products and services to their clients around getting exposure to digital assets. And obviously some of them are doing that now via ETFs. But generally, I'd say the banks in Canada are fairly risk adverse, and they're looking for a business case to justify an investment and exposure to the digital assets. And how I personally think about it is that there's a lot of risks that financial institutions manage. And at this point, it's really a reputational risk that is sort of the last stage, I think, for most financial institutions in Canada to manage is how do they manage their reputation of diversifying into this asset class? Because when you look at the compliance risks, and I always say, we are now registered as a restricted dealer. We are compliant, we are supervised, we have ticked all the boxes, we are doing everything we can to satisfy the needs of our government. And the requirements for Coinbase specifically in our registration are very onerous. And so we have mitigated a lot of the real risks to the public in terms of safety, in terms of know your client, in terms of terrorist and terrorist financing, anti-money laundering concerns. And so we spent the last 2 years, like all the other crypto exchanges in Canada, really making sure that we meet these requirements. And now now we're at a point where I think a lot of financial institutions are stepping in and trying to understand how do we start getting exposure to this asset class and helping our clients get exposure. And so I expect next year the traditional asset managers, the wealth advisors, specifically wealth advisors, actually in Canada, 80% of wealth's managed by investment advisors. These advisors today do not have the green light education permission to solicit advice around digital assets. And so you can imagine if 80% of wealth in Canada is managed by investment advisors, part of the opportunity in Canada is to make sure that investment advisors have the education, the experience, the tools, the technology to sit down with their clients and have that conversation around how do we diversify your portfolio and build a long-term strategy for you. I expect that for many people, they will be looking for exposure. And if our advisors in Canada aren't providing that service, I expect Canadians will look for other types of partners to help them create long-term wealth. And that's really, to be totally frank, that's really what Coinbase Canada is trying to do in Canada, is that we are trying to build long-term partnership with Canadians. Coinbase Canada wants to be a partner for Canadians to help them build wealth long-term and diversify their portfolio into assets that they believe will appreciate in value and maintain their purchasing power and give them exposure into the future economy of digital assets. And so in Canada, there's a number of partners that are in this space. And I think Coinbase can play a big role in helping tens of millions of Canadians safely and securely get access to digital assets. And a lot of that will be directly through Coinbase. And I expect a lot of Canadians will get access to Coinbase's technology through their traditional partners once they integrate technology that we built. Very similar to how a lot of banks around the world are integrating Prime.
Exactly.
So they can provide more of a white label experience and maintain that client relationship, but still making sure that their clients are getting access to the future economy, which is digital.
Well said there. I mean, that's so true. It's like few things in life really get people going: health, wealth, and happiness, realistically the big three. And you always remember how someone made you feel in those three areas of life. And if Coinbase gives the opportunity for Canadians to absolutely turn the money printer on, how the hell are they not going to love you guys? You guys offer one of the most secure, safe, reliable, quick, efficient, easy to use platforms. And you don't even have to be a degen, right? Just DCA into Bitcoin, DCA into, Solana, ETH, whatever you want to call it, and watch the number go up. I do want to go back to the institutions here. This was a question I was going to ask, and you sort of just answered it for me. But the whole banks versus institutions, or exchanges rather, with you guys having such an edge and such a moat with Coinbase Prime, to my knowledge, I don't think, obviously the other, exchanges in Canada do have great products and services and institutional products like Prime, but again, not to the level of Prime, not to the clout, the bandwidth, the TVL of Prime. Would the banks ever, is TD and RBC and Scotia going to come out next year and be like, hey, you can buy Bitcoin directly on our platform? And you would like that to happen, even though that would be directly competing with you guys?
Yeah, I think what we want in Canada, I'll just speak for myself. What I want is, and why I took on this job and this opportunity, is to help ensure that Canadians don't fall behind the rest of the world, right? And the rest of the world's moving very aggressively to adopt digital assets in their strategy. Governments are creating strategies around digital assets. Central banks are creating strategies around digital assets. And governments like the United States are implementing new rules that are going to provide very clear regulatory guidance for innovation in the US. And we expect the new administration will not only put leaders in place to help accelerate the adoption of digital assets, but enable entrepreneurs and innovators to take advantage of building in the US to create value. And that's something that we were chatting about before, was just enabling innovation. And that's really what crypto is about facilitating innovation in the space. That's why we built Base, which is a layer 2 protocol, where we're seeing tens of thousands of developers around the world coming onto Base to build and innovate in Web3. And the banks and institutions that we have in Canada, what we want is Canadians to get access to digital assets. And I don't expect a lot of these financial institutions in Canada, traditional financial institutions, to build all that technology themselves. Coinbase, as an example, has been building, it's been 12 years that, Brian and the team has been building and investing billions of dollars into building, so, as you mentioned, the best technology available in the digital economy. And we expect a lot of institutions to leverage that technology. But the goal is to make sure that Canadians get access to digital assets, and they get access to those digital assets in the most safe, secure way possible.
I love that. Lucas, you're on a roll here, but we do need to give a quick shout out to our sponsor of the show. That is Prime XBT. And when we get back, we're going to keep buzzing on everything Coinbase and crypto in Canada related. Huge shout out to Prime XBT. We love these guys as they offer a robust trading system for both beginners and professional traders. Doesn't matter if you're a rookie or a vet, you can easily design, customize your layouts and widgets to best fit your trading style. Prime XBT is also running an exclusive promo for listeners of the Crypto News podcast. Use the promo code CryptoNews50, that is CryptoNews50, all one word, to receive 50% of your deposit credited to your trading account. Again, CryptoNews50, all one word, to receive 50% of your deposit credited to your trading account. Let's talk about next year, as by the time this episode airs, which will be give or take a week to 10 days after you and I recording on Wednesday, December 11th, we're pretty darn close to 2025. I don't see how we don't really enter another leg up. That's just me personally. Again, I'm just stealing thoughts from people 100 times smarter than myself. The charts look good. The sentiment looks good. The morale looks good. M2 money supply continues to grow. That money's got to go somewhere. People are horny and ready for digital assets. I think it's floodgates open. Let's sort of narrow that down, talk about the micro, and narrow that down into Canada. You think that, financial institutions, there's a good chance they will start adopting Bitcoin, but maybe on just sort of the even more micro level, the average Joe and Josephine. What does the sort of 2025 crypto outlook look like in Canada, Lucas?
Yeah, sure. I mean, just before getting to Canada, I think, it's important to understand that globally, and this is just maybe I'll say a personal opinion, but what I'm seeing is around the world is most jurisdictions exploring introducing regulatory regimes and clarity around digital assets. And that clarity is really what the industry has been asking for the last decade. That's what Coinbase has been pursuing in the United States, is clear rules so that we can innovate and build safe, compliant platforms and helps people get access to the digital economy. And that's, for me, the most exciting part of 2025 is the regulatory clarity that's going to come into market. We're pretty confident we're going to see that in the US with the new administration. We're going to see new leadership around the Securities and Exchange Commission. We're going to see new leadership around the CFTC. We have a crypto czar, David Sachs.
Yeah.
We have now a crypto czar in the United States. So we have leaders who really understand the asset class, who have been learning about this asset class for a decade, to put them into positions where they can unlock a lot of the restraint that we've seen in this industry because of the lack of clarity. And because of that, jurisdictions all over the world are identifying how do we build regimes and frameworks that can provide clarity around stablecoins, provide clarity around using digital assets as payment instruments versus securities, and really thinking about defining them. But for your audience, I would say the way I think about this, and I'm not a lawyer, but the way I kind of think about this is we really have a definitional problem in the world around securities and commodities and payment instruments.
Yeah.
And now we have this new asset called a digital asset, and jurisdictions all over the world are trying to identify, how do you define this new type of asset? And some jurisdictions have tried a square peg round hole strategy, where they try to take digital assets and jam them into an old securities regime or a commodities regime or a payments regime. And other jurisdictions around the world have been building and innovating new regimes to accommodate for digital assets and make sure that we're leveraging the power of Bitcoin and all the technology that comes with digital assets. And so that is really what's exciting, is that clarity, because then builders can build and people can get access to these digital assets and really start using them in a way that provides more utility in the world. And I think that's what we all want to see. We all want to see that utility come to fruition. And so in Canada, I expect that next year, while we do have a fairly stringent and well-defined regulatory regime in Canada, I expect all the institutions and governments to start taking advantage of that. And just going back to, what's going on in Vancouver, we expect many institutions in Canada to start taking advantage of that clarity and thinking about how to service their clients. Because what we've learned since the US election is that, crypto's not going anywhere.
Here to stay.
Right?
Yep.
It's been cemented into the history books. And now companies are starting to appreciate that and starting to think about providing access. And so wealth, I think, is a really exciting area in Canada, because wealth right now is not participating in the digital economy. So 80% of money is managed by, like we chatted about, 80% of wealth is sort of captured inside of these investment advisors and pension funds, money managers. And they're starting to think about how to diversify their own portfolios in the digital economy. But honestly, I think Canadians in general are starting to take more ownership of their wealth.
Yep.
And while Canadians aren't as prevalent in self-directing their investments as other markets like the United States, I expect more Canadians will take more ownership of their investments into digital assets by opening an account on Coinbase and doing that themselves. And I'd say, most people I talk to, like my neighbors, right, they're still intimidated by the digital economy. They're still
100%.
curious about how to do it. It's still a somewhat overwhelming experience for them, because they know it's important, right? They know they need to participate in it, but there's still a gap in them understanding how to do it themselves. And I think that's really the opportunity that we're working on in Canada, is educating Canadians on what digital assets are. And that is in part eliminating a lot of the biases that have been built over the last decade around.
How do we do that though? I love that you brought this up, and I've thought about this, as well. Like I look at my parents and my parents' friends, or my buddies' parents and their friends, like I'm 29 years old, I'm a 95. Most of my friends, they know what it is. They can name, a Bitcoin, Solana, and ETH. Probably can't name anything else than that. And more of my friends don't have exposure than do have exposure. Exactly like you discussed. There's still that bias. There's still this sort of negative narrative towards crypto. But like, what's it going to take? Is it the big dogs like you guys just doing a really good job of educating and teaching crypto literacy? Is it going to be like a Justin Bieber, maybe one of the most famous and popular and sought after Canadians, partnering with you guys, or an Austin Matthews? I mean, you're a Sens guy, or a Brady Tkachuk. Like, what's it going to take to actually get Canadians past that finish line?
I think there's three things. One is a federal government that defines a strategy around how to incorporate digital assets into our economy. And we're lacking that today. Yeah. We lack a government with a strong perspective and appreciation around the technology. And I think generally that's a big trend around the world. And we're seeing it in the US, but governments are going to be, my personal view is that governments will be expected to do more with less.
Gotcha.
And they have not had a lot of pressure to do more with less, but we're seeing that happen in the US. And I think many governments around the world, including Canada, will follow, because we need to. Our governments are not efficient enough. I think generally people want better services from their government. We pay in Canada, for your listeners around the world, I pay over 50% of my income in taxes.
It's absurd.
Right? So we pay an enormous amount of taxes in Canada. And I think a lot of Canadians want better services. And how do you do that? How do you provide better services? Traditionally, we've just hired more public service. So in Canada, we've increased our public service, I think, more than any other government around the world as a percentage over the last few years. And I think the trend is going to be governments looking into technology to drive efficiencies. And that's honestly what we do every single day in tech. We figure out how to use technology to do more with less.
Yeah, well said.
And I think crypto is going to be a natural part of that. Obviously, there's AI and there's machine learning and there's all these other technologies that governments will need to use to provide, to do more with less. But crypto is certainly one of those technologies that governments are going to look at to help define a strategy where they can provide more value to tax people paying taxes. And so that's the first thing, is just a government that really understands this opportunity. And certainly we're going into an election cycle next year. and our industry is preparing to educate our public officials around the opportunity. And Stand with Crypto is probably one of the areas where Coinbase has invested a lot and helped build Stand with Crypto, which is an advocacy group. If you haven't heard of Stand with Crypto, it is an advocacy group that helps connect members of parliament and government officials around the world with entrepreneurs in their local ridings and jurisdictions so that they can understand the use cases of digital assets and speak about it with confidence. And what we saw in the US election was 80% of senators that were elected were pro-crypto on both sides.
It's wild.
Sorry, 90% of senators, 80% of congressmen were pro-crypto at the end of the day on both sides. Both parties were pro-crypto at the end of the day on both sides. And so we saw this massive education within the administration of the government. And what did that education prevail? It brought in an administration that really understood and appreciated the opportunity to take advantage of this technology. And I expect that will happen with governments all over the world. And certainly our industry is organizing to make sure that every single member of parliament in Canada appreciates this technology for what it is and can incorporate it into our economy appropriately. So that's sort of the first thing. The second thing I think is traditional trust in banks for financial institutions. When you think of trust, Canadians look for very mature companies when it comes to money to trust. And Coinbase is, we are working as hard as we can to earn the trust of Canadians and help Canadians understand that we are a publicly traded company. We are audited. We are supervised. We are acting in the best interest of our clients. We are doing everything we can to provide the safest, most secure infrastructure possible to give Canadians access to the digital economy. And that's, I think, over time, we will continue to build the trust of Canadians and help them appreciate that, maybe they should explore another financial partner to help them create wealth. Yeah. And we hope that Coinbase can be that other partner for Canadians that they can trust to work with over their life to create wealth and to diversify their assets. And the third thing I'd say is, in terms of adoption in Canada, is going to be the rest of the world moving aggressively to adopt this technology, and Canada feeling like we need to step up and
FOMO, baby.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think we will see that. I think we see what's happening in the United States. I think next year is going to be really exciting in terms of innovation in our space. And I think leaders in Canada, in terms of bank leaders, institution leaders, wealth leaders, will start looking at what the rest of the world is doing and realizing they need to change. They need to start taking steps forward to learn about how to integrate this into their business model. And the way I think about that is the benchmark. If you're in the wealth business, there's these benchmarks around what you should expect from your investment advisor to return to you every single year. And that is dependent on what's called a benchmark. And every sort of industry relies on different types of benchmarks as sort of a gauge of, did you do better than the average or did you do less than the average? And I think that benchmark is going to inherently change over the next year. And that benchmark will include exposure to digital assets. And many people who think about keeping up, right? How do you keep up with purchasing power? Will realize that at some point they need to diversify their assets and own crypto just to maintain an equal positioning relative to everyone else.
Well said, Lucas. What an episode. You were on an absolute roll here. I do wish you had some more time, but we'll definitely have to have you on for round 2. Before we let you go, any news popping off over the next couple weeks, months? Obviously, 2025 is going to be huge for you guys. And just for reference, this episode will air, about 10 days after you and I are recording right now. We'll call it the 21st, 22nd, 23rd. Any news to sort of drop on the Crypto News pod before we let you go?
I have nothing today, but we do have some great news coming up just around what I said at the beginning, which is, we are doing everything we can right now to bring our product to ensure that Canadians can move money in and out of Coinbase safely. And we will be announcing new payment methods on Coinbase to help Canadians really easily get money in and out of the platform, which is, really important for the average Canadian to know that they can get money in and out effortlessly on Coinbase. And we do have a few more announcements that I will save to next year. But Matt, great to chat. Appreciate you having me on the pod, and I wish you all the best. Hopefully we'll see you this summer at one of the conferences here back home.
100%. I will be at Consensus in May. But before then, any Coinbase Canada socials, Lucas? Anything strictly Canada related? Obviously, everyone knows where they can find everything Coinbase related, and we will plug everything in the show notes as always. But anything Coinbase Canada specific?
For Coinbase, I would just go to coinbase.com. That's the best place to start. And if you're in Canada and you're curious about crypto and you want to take a first step, I'd recommend going to coinbase.com/learn. that is really the best place to start and go through some content and get yourself familiar with what crypto is, what Bitcoin is, what a protocol is, and just understand the basics of what this technology can do for you.
Gotcha. Folks, what an episode with Lucas Matheson, CEO of Coinbase Canada. He was on a roll this episode, and we do have a good chunk of Canadian listeners who do tune in every single week, twice a week. You guys are going to love this one. He literally crushed it. Crypto in Canada, institutional interest, improving crypto literacy in Canada, banks versus exchanges, you name it, he touched it. Huge shout out to Lucas and the team for making this happen. If you guys enjoyed this one, and I hope you did, please do subscribe. It would mean the world to my team and I. Speaking to the team, love you guys. Thank you so much for everything. And as always, back to the listeners, keep on growing those bags and keep on staying healthy, wealthy, and happy. Love you guys, and we'll see you on the next one. Ciao.